There are moments in history that change everything. Not battles, not empires, not revolutions. A meal, a table, 13 men, one room, one night. And by morning, nothing would ever be the same again. Most people know the image. Leonardo da Vinci painted it. Every church has a version of it. The long table, the bread, the wine, Jesus in the center, the disciples around him. But the painting does not tell you what was actually said at that table. It does not tell you about the argument that broke out that night. It does not tell you about the moment Jesus got up and did something so shocking that Peter refused to let him do it. It does not tell you about the conversation that happened after Judas left. And it does not tell you about the one question, asked by a disciple named Thomas, that Jesus answered with words that 2,000 years later still stop people in their tracks. Tonight, we go back to that room. We go back to that table. And we open the file on what really happened the night before everything changed. To understand the Last Supper, you need to understand what kind of meal it was. This was not a casual dinner. This was Passover, the most sacred meal in the entire Jewish calendar. A feast that every Jewish family had been celebrating for over 1,000 years, commemorating the night God delivered Israel from slavery in Egypt. There was a specific structure, specific prayers, specific foods that meant specific things. The unleavened bread, the bitter herbs, the lamb. 4 cups of wine, each one representing a promise God had made to his people. Every person at that table had grown up celebrating this meal every single year of their life. They knew exactly what it meant. They knew the words by heart. And that is why what Jesus did with that meal, how he took those ancient symbols and completely reinterpreted them, was so extraordinary. He did not just eat the Passover. He became it. The evening began with a dispute. Luke's Gospel records something that almost no preacher mentions when they tell the Last Supper story. The disciples were arguing about which of them was the greatest. Not before the meal, not on the way there. At the table, during the Passover supper. On the last night Jesus would be with them before his death. They were arguing about rank, about who was most important, about who would sit highest in the coming kingdom. Think about what that means. Jesus had been telling them for weeks what was about to happen. He had told them clearly, the Son of Man would be handed over, condemned, mocked, beaten, and killed. He had told them 3 times. And they were arguing about who was the greatest. He did not rebuke them harshly. He said something far more devastating. He said, "The kings of the nations lord it over their people, but it must not be that way among you. Whoever wants to be greatest among you must become the servant of all." And then he did something that made the point in a way no words could. He got up from the table. He took off his outer robe. He wrapped a towel around his waist. He poured water into a basin, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, one by one. In the ancient world, foot washing was the most degrading task in any household. It was not done by servants. It was done by the lowest-ranking slave, someone whose status was so far beneath everyone else that they handled the dirt from other people's feet. And the Son of God knelt down and did it, one by one, until he came to Peter. And Peter said, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus said, "You do not understand what I am doing now, but you will understand later." Peter said, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus said, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." And Peter, being Peter, immediately swung to the opposite extreme and said, "Then, Lord, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." When Jesus finished, he sat back down and said something that has echoed through centuries. He said, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that is what I am. I have set you an example. No servant is greater than his master. Now that you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." The greatest act of leadership in that room that night was not a sermon. It was a towel and a basin of water. Then the atmosphere changed. Jesus became deeply troubled in his spirit. He said, "I tell you the truth. One of you is going to betray me." The disciples stared at each other, completely confused, completely shocked. John's Gospel says they began asking one by one, "Lord, is it me?" Nobody suspected the answer. Peter, who was reclining at the table, gestured to the disciple sitting closest to Jesus and whispered, "Ask him which one he means." That disciple leaned back toward Jesus and asked, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus answered quietly, "It is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." He dipped the bread. He gave it to Judas.